Chapter 230 of Kengan Omega is out, and I'm actually sort of happy that the fight between Hatsumi versus Canada is now getting the full focus of the chapter, because the previous chapters before this one, though they did include the chapter, there was a lot of other information that was inside it, whereas like let's say 228 had this stuff about death dealers and how basically the leader of death dealers is going to meet the Kengan Association after this fight, which, by the way, depending on who actually goes, because no one knows who the leader of death dealers are, but we do know who the CEO is. It is the second connector, and the second connector is, in my opinion, I do have an entire theory on this, working with the other connector, which is Shen Wulong with the last Nico and all of them. Although, what seems to be a lot more interesting is that it doesn't seem like all the Worm members are aware of this fact. So it's a pretty odd type of situation even for some of the Worm members. Point is, we might get to see the connector soon. But that was 228. In 229, we got to hear about Ryan. This chapter 230 is completely focused on Hatsumi versus Canada. And that's really good for a fight, in my opinion, because a lot of things were kind of fleshed out, especially what I predicted would happen in my reviews, where I said, look, Hatsumi will probably catch on to what is happening, and we get to hear a bit more about determined prediction and how it basically works, with Canada basically saying he manipulates his opponent to do what he basically wants them to do, because pre-initiative, essentially the highest level of foresight, allows the user to basically see the amount of possibilities that their opponent has and counter those possibilities, basically. So it's a prediction factor. What Canada does, what determination is that he narrows the amounts of things that the person who can use pre-initiative can see, so that he basically knows, he takes like sample data, although this is a bit too technical, and since he knows what's in the data, he can now basically work 2 steps ahead, whereas the person who's using pre-initiative is basically trying to work 1 step ahead. So using this, Canada can basically stay ahead of people who are using pre-initiative, because he's deliberately making moves that he knows his opponent will be able to see. This is actually fairly interesting because we get to see that it even works on Hatsumi. You saw, like, I think in the last chapter it was evidently clear that Hatsumi was just dominating the fight. However, once perfect determination is in use, Kaneda is actually able to put up a pretty good fight in this chapter, and he even gets very close to either dealing a critical blow on Hatsumi or just straight up ending the fight. But Hatsumi is able to cope with what is happening because, of course, he doesn't fall for the trick. And he basically snaps out of it in the nick of time, basically, before dodging what was Canada's strongest or most lethal move, which was the Kunjin-style organ breaker. And because of this, Hatsumi now has a new type of strategy, because he realizes that, look, I can't use pre-initiative, right? But he also, I know some people are thinking, well, why doesn't he just not use pre-initiative, I guess, right? I think it's a death sentence if he doesn't use it. Because keep in mind, Canada does have foresight, but it's not as good as like the top tiers, right? It's the reason why he can use determination in the first place, because he has at least some knowledge on foresight. And so, if Hatsumi is to completely abandon that, he abandons one of his very few advantages against Canada. And now Canada not only has foresight, he also has this determined foresight as well. I don't think it ends well for Hatsumi if he goes in that direction. It just won't work out. Even though I know a lot of people think Hatsumi can work things out like that, I just think it's too implausible that you can just become just make your entire mind blank and it just work out like that. I don't know if that's actually a plausible option for Hatsumi. Instead, Hatsumi seems to be testing Kaneda's patience here, and it's becoming more of a mind game because now they're slowly trying to attack each other, or to put it quite simply, what they're trying to do is force the other to counterattack. And I think they're forcing them to counterattack in the way Hatsumi is trying to force Kaneda into a direction he doesn't want to go. Because determination only really works if Kaneda dictates the next moves. So if he's forced to do something else, then determination might not be nearly as effective. So I think that's what Hatsumi is trying to play at here with his slow movement. And Kaneda counters with also going a bit slower. They basically try to test each other's patience, seeing who attacks first and countering, right? But for very different reasons here. Hatsumi is trying to get Kaneda to counter so that he can use prediction and lock him down. Whereas Kaneda is trying to get Hatsumi to do what he wants him to do so that he can use determined prediction. It's a bit confusing in a bit, but the chapter does explain it quite well. But it's basically a mind game at this point. In other words, in short, it's a mind game. And I think this is pretty good in terms of like one of the technical fights in the series. I know it might not be nearly as entertaining or flashy, but I think this fight is incredibly important to show what determination can do and its limits in the series, because this new weapon will be lethal for the future of the series, right? I could see, like, think of it this way. If it's this broken with Kaneda, can you imagine what will happen if, let's say, Hatsumi could master it himself? Or let's say Lo Long could also get a hold of that type of technique. It could be a game changer. It's literally a game-changing technique against even the strongest in the verse. So seeing it in action, I think, is incredibly important, and this fight is turning out to be one of the most important fights in the series, at least as far as determination can go and what a person with pre-initiative can do against it. But yeah, that's the chapter. I did talk about this fight for a while because the fight is the only thing that this fight is about, which is kind of nice. But yeah, that's it. Until the next chapter review, take it easy.